Hello and welcome to another Jog Vlogs revision session. This one is going to be covering Paper 3, Topic 3, which is called UK Challenges. So this is the very last topic that you're going to have to answer exam questions on because it's the final part of the final paper. And it's a bit of a unique one in the sense that it kind of is a bit more synoptic. It covers a variety of issues and links together some of the topics. So I'm going to outline for you a paper summary on the next slide before going over the content for you. And then there's some exam question sort of practice, but also a way for you to see how the exam papers are kind of structured so you can prepare yourself as well as possible. So, in summary, these are challenges faced by the UK today. And the format of all of these challenges, and there are 4 challenges, is it outlines what the challenge is, what it involves. It looks at some of the impacts that challenge could present, or does present, and then it looks at how you could resolve that challenge. So every single one of these challenges has kind of that 3 main kind of sections: what it is, what does it do, and how can we solve it. Okay. Now it does cover parts of papers 1 and 2 that you've already looked at. So your overall revision for papers 1 and 2 is going to essentially really give you a head start on revising the content, at least for paper 3. There is one 12 mark plus 4 marks for SPAG question, so 16 overall, at the end of this topic. It is the biggest question. I know by now up to this point you've been thinking, right, 8 mark questions, that's the hardest stuff to deal with. There is actually this one, and it is only one, 12 mark discuss question. And it will always be that one command word, discuss. Now I've actually prepared a separate revision tutorial specifically for that discuss question, for that very one question, that very last question that you're going to face, because it is so individual, but it is very formulaic. Just like assess or evaluate or examine questions, you can answer it in a very structured format, and if you watch that tutorial and follow the advice and practice, it will be absolutely no more difficult than doing any 8 mark question that you've already been practicing. Okay, so there is a 12 mark plus 4 for SPAG question as well. There is a resource booklet. Like all the other topics and papers, there is a resource booklet, like a little separate thing with images and graphs and maps. The resource booklet is always important, but in this paper and for this part of the paper, it's particularly important because your 12 mark discuss question is very strongly based around the resources in the resource booklet, and you actually need to use them for every single part of your essay. So it will become a very, very important factor when it comes to formulating your discuss question. But again, see the separate revision tutorial for that, and you can see that in practice. There are 4 main areas, as I've mentioned before, that we class as UK challenges. Consumption and environmental challenges, so how much stuff we're using and what effect it's having on the environment. Population and economic challenges, landscape challenges, and climate change challenges. So those are the 4 UK challenges that the exam board present to us, okay, and that you go through. Now, starting straight away with consumption and environmental challenges. So we're now going to move on to the content. As a bit of an outline, a précis to this, the UK's population, which I know is slightly different because that's a population challenge, but the UK's population is going to change in the next 50 years. It's going to increase, and that's pretty much obvious. It's pretty. Most of us knew that already. So the population of the UK is going to change over the next 50 years, and with more people, it puts pressure on resources because people use stuff, they drive stuff, they burn stuff, they power stuff, they eat stuff and drink stuff, and because of all of that, essentially, it leads to greater consumption. Because we are using more, we're consuming more, we are therefore putting pressure on the environment to sustain us. Because if you eat more food, you need more space to grow it. You need more water to irrigate it. If you need more energy, you've got to generate the energy, and that's got to be utilize power stations and things like that which require space, often in the countryside. So you can see how consumption, our use of stuff, is linked to the environment, and they, as a challenge to the UK, they are certainly something we need to look at. One of the ways that we need to look at it is through sustainable transport, and that's the specific way that the exam board go through this. Now, this is just to illustrate to you this UK population growth forecast. So you can see by 2030, they think the UK's population is going to be just over 70 million, approximately. As it is currently, well, I would say currently, 2015, it was about 64 million. So it's definitely increasing, and it's predicted to go up by about 13.3% over that next sort of, well, over the next 10 years or so that it will predict from now. Okay, so it's going to go up. It's, without any shadow of a doubt. So the UK is becoming overpopulated relative to the consumption of resources we've got. There are too many people compared with the available natural resources. Now we can ship stuff in, that's fine, but that's not always the most reliable thing to do. We only actually produce 60% of the food that we eat in this country. So it's 40% of the food that you and I eat, and people of the population of the UK eat, comes from abroad. And as the UK's population is expected to rise to about 70.5 million with current trends, it's going to put extra pressure on those food resources, water resources that I've already outlined to you. Okay, but also immigration is a factor, and something we're going to have to look at in a bit more detail. So in 2013, 25% of births were actually to mothers born outside the UK. So people that are essentially migrants contributed 1 in every 4 of the births in the UK, and that is just not a witch hunt. This is a stating a fact that actually our population is increasing as a result of things like immigration. Okay, it's not the only thing, and also there's lots of massive benefits with immigration too. But obviously the additional numbers of people in the population are great for the workforce, but we need to be clever about how we work out our consumption. So bearing in mind obviously population growth and a couple of these stats are the basis behind this growth of consumption and therefore the knock-on effects on the environment. So obviously with more of us, we're putting pressure on ecosystems, and ecosystems can be any kind of natural environment, all of these natural areas we've got in the UK, and our pressure on resources and our need to have resources means that we are producing more CO2 potentially. If you are manufacturing more goods, if you are using more energy, all of that, most of it, depending on how you do it, produces CO2. We need space, and space causes destruction to natural habitats. We need to water our crops, so that puts huge pressure on water systems, and have we got enough water in the right places at the right time? New houses, where do we build them? On floodplains, great. So therefore it's going to increase the risk of flooding because it increases runoff. So there's a nice link to our UK landscapes topic there. Food demands, which intensify agricultural practices. Again, more space needed to grow more crops. And again, that links into that pressure on water systems. And we also build on greenfield sites because it's quite expensive to build on brownfield sites. And again, greenfield, brownfield, we've discussed this in Changing Cities. So again, this is not concepts of information that are totally unfamiliar to you. So clearly, our need to consume more goods and need for more stuff because of population increase is going to put pressure on ecosystems and all of these different pressures that you can see on that spider diagram. Now this is an exam style question which I've just chucked in here. Suggest one way population growth puts pressure on ecosystems. So this is just literally linking this population growth to how it causes this sort of pressure. So could you answer that question? It's a very straightforward one. If you want to have an attempt at it, pause the screen. Okay, if you've paused the screen and had an attempt, it might look something along the lines of with a growing number of people, there is greater need for energy, which puts potentially more CO2 into the atmosphere. That's the kind of thing you're after. Okay. Now, suggest means you must say why, because suggest is like explain or outline or give reasons. Okay. So suggest is the same as explain. So you've got to use a connective, and it wants one way for 2 marks. So you've got to try and extend it with that connective. So population growth increases the need for housing is another example. So land like forests are cleared to make space. That's a really basic example, but shows you just how quickly you can put together a question that looks quite intimidating. Suggest one way population growth puts pressure on ecosystems. Population growth increases the need for housing. Tick. So land like forests are cleared to make space. Tick, tick. There we go. Okay. Right. Now, solutions. And I told you, remember, the structure of this is I outline what the problem is. Okay, that's the problem. Okay, these are the impacts of that problem, and these are the solutions. So it's that 3-step structure for every single one of these challenges. So what solutions have we got? Well, we focus, and the exam would focus on sustainable transport solutions, because transport and sustainable transport can reduce CO2, and that can obviously have big benefits for the UK in terms of the space for roads and all that sort of stuff, okay, and car parks and all that. So congestion charging, park and ride schemes, and cycle lanes or public use bicycles. Now, for each of these 3 strategies, you need to know how it works, a real world example, some positives and negatives. Now, hopefully alarm bells are ringing that, positives, negatives. This means that I could have to extend my answer. You're not going to have to do an evaluate question on this, but you could certainly have a discuss question that focuses on this particular aspect of this particular challenge. So in terms of consumption and environmental challenges, if you're looking for solutions, then these 3 with their positives, negatives, and details, specific details, I'll put all 3 there for you, are something that you could use. And actually, in the example I give you for the discuss tutorial revision session video, it actually uses sustainable transport as its main focus. So you've got a really good example of how this could apply. Okay, but for your notes, you need to make sure that you've got information about the congestion charge, what it is, where it is, good and bad, park and ride schemes, what, where, good, bad, and cycle lanes and public use bicycles, what, where, good, bad. Okay, so all the detail for you is there in summary on the screen. You just need to pause the screen to make sure you've got all that detail sufficiently in your work, in your notes. When you're ready, unpause the screen and we'll look at the next challenge. Okay, so the second challenge is population and economic challenges. So again, we're looking at that 3-step structure. So outline what is the challenge here. So population economic challenges. You need to know about this thing called the 2-speed economy in the UK. Now this links in nicely to the topic of development, because some parts of the UK are more developed than others, uneven development in the UK. And we looked at the reasons for that. We looked at the historic reasons, but also economic reasons for that. And the 2-speed economy is really the term given to that difference between the London and the South East's level of economic activity and therefore development, and places like the North East and how they are struggling economically and therefore their development is lagging behind. So the 2-speed economy in the UK is an important concept you need to know. You also need to know about the good and bad of using Brownfield and Greenfield sites. So building on land that's been built on before, like Brownfield sites, and building on land that's never been built on. You need to know both the good and bad for each of them. And you need to know about the UK's net migration, but also attitudes towards migration, which I'm sure most of you are fully aware of. So the 2-speed economy, and this is for your notes if you haven't got a definition, is the uneven growth in the UK's economy. This is why the South East is developing much faster than the North. And a solution to that. So identify the problem. What's the solution? One of the solutions is improving transport networks. And again, transport seems to come in quite a lot to these challenges. You might have heard of the HS2 or High Speed 2 rail network. That's designed to try and move industry and business further north because it'll be easier to get to and from. So the idea is it encourages business and industry to move northwards, and what they can get if they move northwards is they get cheaper land because there's more space, and they also get an educated workforce because they're all part of the UK's workforce and education system, but it's a cheaper workforce as well because wages are generally a little bit lower. So cheaper land, cheaper workforce, that's going to encourage industry further north, which will help those northern areas develop. Now this is the HS2's kind of main plan. How many of these plans still exist today, I don't know, because it's so controversial, the HS2 network. And so far, it's only really kind of going up to Birmingham from what I know. But the idea is it links London and the South East much more quickly to the north, and particularly places like Liverpool, Manchester, the sort of northwest, where it should only take you 1 hour and 6 minutes to get to London from Manchester. That is insane. If you think of the distance, and I'll put my map here, Norwich is here, and it takes 2 hours to get to London. Okay, 2 hours. That distance is doubled, and yet it's going to take half the time. So that shows you just how good this HS2 network is supposed to be. Right, so with regards to building on Brownfield and Greenfield sites, like I said, you need to know obviously about the two-speed economy, which I've highlighted. You also need to know about advantages and disadvantages for building on Greenfield sites, which have never previously been built on, or Brownfield sites, which have been built on and used previously. So for each, advantages, okay, and disadvantages, in brief, you need to know both. Okay, advantages and disadvantages for both, please. So again, those notes are on the screen. Feel free to add to your notes if you don't already have these notes in your book. You should have if you've been in lessons, but if you haven't, then here they all are. Make sure you pause the screen to get all the notes written down properly. Now here's an example of how you could be asked this in a question. I've got proper examples for you coming up as well. It says suggest, so it's that explain kind of word again, 2 advantages of building on Brownfield sites for 4 marks. So it's suggest, so you've got to use connectives. 2 advantages of building on Brownfield sites. Okay, now Brownfield is here, 2 advantages, services are already installed, and it can make an area that's ugly look a lot nicer. So one of the advantages is the removal of disused factories and the improvement of aesthetics of an area. That is really how a place looks nicer. A second advantage is that infrastructure like roads is already available, reducing development costs and timescales. Now I would say this isn't a very safe 4-mark answer because I don't think the first point is well developed. So I would say developing Brownfield sites improves how an area looks. This is because it removes old, disused, rundown factories. Okay, that's slightly better. But you can see just how concisely this has got 4 marks. Okay, using the information that you've got from the table before. If you want to practice this, okay, it might be worthwhile you using this exact same table, okay, but just varying up the question. So suggest 2 disadvantages of building on Brownfield sites, and then try and answer it. Suggest 2 advantages of building on Greenfield sites. Suggest 2 disadvantages of building on Greenfield sites. If you've done that, you've done every possible exam question on Brownfield and Greenfield sites with regards to an explain. Okay, now attempt those if you want to. If not, we're going to move on to the next part. So you need to be aware of, and I mentioned this as well at the start of this challenge, you need to be aware of UK migration. So net migration in the UK, you can see, has fluctuated, that means gone up and down, but it has gone up over time. All right, it has increased, and migration means that in people moving in and out of the UK, and we look at changing cities. We look at migration, specifically to Norwich. Now, what you can see here is obviously there are people moving in and people leaving, but overall more people are coming into, emigrating into the UK, flowing into the UK, than leaving the UK. So that's firstly the overall trend. Now, you need to be aware that different people have different views towards immigration or migration, and you need to be aware of every person's different views. Okay, now a lot of it is common sense. Someone who's unemployed in the UK in an area where there's lots of migrants who are working is going to be not necessarily too pleased with migration because they see it as a barrier to them getting a job. Okay, so some of them are very, very much obvious kind of things. Now you need to be aware of a few specific ones. Local councils. Local councils are responsible for local services, schools, hospitals, etc. So because of schools and hospitals or local areas, doctor surgeries, may be suffering with an influx of people using them with maybe less English language skills than locals, then that puts pressure on those services. What I would say, however, is that there is still a lot of money being generated through council tax, etc., for those local councils through these additional people. Although, if you see, if there's more migrant workers, for example, in a house, than you would expect to find in a non-migrant worker. So let's say 5 people live in a house that is designed normally for 2 or 3, then you might find that your council tax receipts are slightly less than they should be. Businesses. Often businesses really welcome migrants because not only does it increase their workforce, but it increases their skill workforce, because migrant workers are not bad at what they do. They're good at what they do, just like the UK. And they don't work for cheaper, they just work willingly. So we've got skills that are in short supply, and we've got shortages in things like dentistry and in healthcare that can be filled through migrant workers. So lots of businesses welcome that migrant workforce coming in. Some people obviously believe migrants reduce the availability of jobs, which is arguably true, but the jobs were available beforehand and were only filled because there was a shortage. But you need to be aware of those stakeholder views. So some people who are unemployed are definitely not going to see that viewpoint. They're going to say, well, I haven't got a job because this Polish man's got my job, for example. So now there's a bit of a skills question. This is also common to the challenges topic. You'll have a lot of skills-based questions, and you'll see just how many actually in a minute. It's not that many. But you can have a go at doing that. Using the graph, calculate the range of net migration between 75 and 2015. So if you can work out roughly, and you can estimate, okay, what 75 was and what 2015 is, what is the change between those figures? Okay, when you're ready, unpause the screen. So the third challenge we're going to be looking at is landscape challenges, and this starts off by looking at national parks. This whole kind of aspect of landscape challenges in the UK is national parks and how we manage them, as well as things like rivers and coastal flooding and how we can manage that. So they're all landscape challenges which link in nicely to the UK landscapes topic. So you need to be aware of different approaches to how we conserve the UK with national parks as a focus, and how we manage specifically river and coastal flooding risks. Now, you've covered loads of hard and soft engineering strategies in your coast and river sections of the UK landscapes topic. Okay, so a lot of your revision for this particular bit is dusted. All right. Ecosystems will also be another helpful topic here because, again, it will provide you useful information about some of the protected species that you might find in parts of the national park areas. So conservation and development is a bit of a contradiction of terms, really. If you want to conserve something, you want to look after it, you want to protect it. But if you want to develop something, you change it, and you add roads and things like that. So can the two be the same? Well, the idea is that it's a bit of a balancing act, but they should be able to be the same. You should be able to develop areas in a way that still allows conservation to take place, and that's what the national parks really face a challenge of, because they want to encourage people to come and see them, but they don't want loads of people to come and trample on rare orchids and things. So managing the UK's national parks is divided into different categories. Habitats, managing specific habitats, managing range of species, so biodiversity, managing climate change effects, and historical environments, so things like old houses and stuff. So things that you can do, restoration of rivers. So if you restore river areas, you put in things like river fences, that can help prevent rivers eroding, and therefore maintain the river as it looks currently. Promoting the use of electric bikes to reduce the number of cars is another thing that you could do to help reduce the need to build more roads, etc., and reduce air pollution to those areas, and noise pollution too. Using renewable energy sources is another good way of reducing CO2 atmospheric pollutants, although a lot of renewable energy resources can affect the landscape because a lot of it's based on wind farms, which the UK utilises quite a lot, which a lot of people don't like so much. Monitoring of historic sites to check the condition, making sure they're looking good. Since lockdown, Blickling Hall has been struggling with its kind of historic textiles because little bugs are going in and moths are eating clothes and stuff like that, because the people haven't been in and out, and it's been a bit quieter, less disturbed. So they've caused obviously issues with that. So if you regularly monitor those sites, then again you can check the condition of those. Working with other organisations, so English Heritage working together with national parks to help work out the best solutions. And doing things like converting old farm buildings. So you keep the building as it is, maintain how it looks to the natural environment, but you change its use. You change the internal workings of it. You convert it to housing. So you've still got what looks like farm housing, but you can house people, like maybe 4 people, 5 families in a converted barn, is maybe a better way to allow affordable housing in the local area without detracting from the local area. Because surely it's got to be cheaper to convert an old barn than build from scratch new horrible red brick houses. So, landscape challenges. Now, this again is a bit of exam practice that the revision guide provides you, the official exam board revision guide one. But again, I'm going to give you specific advice from papers in a minute. So, you could explain one way the UK's national parks are being conserved. So all you have to do is name a way and then explain how that's going to help conserve it. So on the screen there is a model answer already for you. Feel free to have a little look at that. Okay, so other aspects of landscape challenges that you need to cover are the idea of river and coastal flooding, or the problems associated with that. And you might recognise this image. This is the Thames flood barrier, which is an amazing thing, and it protects London from things like storm surges. And you might be able to make out essentially the barrier is preventing a big influx of water from travelling down the Thames into London, and therefore flooding a lot of the buildings and housing and industry that's just there. You can see the Millennium Dome there, or the O2 it's called now, and all the built up areas around the Docklands area. So the Environment Agency, they're the group responsible for managing UK's coast and rivers, and so they've got a job on their hands as sea level rise occurs and climate change affects rainfall patterns. Now what they do is they monitor and they provide early warning systems. So they look at flood levels and river levels and sea levels, and if they think it's going to be a problem, they'll send out word on the news, on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, on everything basically. They also use engineering at the coasts and at rivers. So at the coasts, a summary of the stuff that we've looked at. Hard engineering can include things like seawall and groins and riprap. Soft engineering can involve things like beach nourishment and offshore reefs. Rivers, they use things like dams and reservoirs as hard engineering. Channelization, so making the channels wider and deeper. And they use floodplain zoning and washlands as their soft engineering techniques. Again, if you're not sure about these, you need to make sure you go back over the UK landscapes topic and either look at that lesson or those lessons specifically, which will be saved on the YouTube channel, or you can watch the revision guide, which will give you more information as a summary on those. There are regulations as well the Environment Agency implement with regards to building. So you can't build on floodplains willy-nilly, although we seem to be doing so. And near the coast, new developments are obviously quite restricted and regulated to see if it's safe. And they'll also do things like river catchment management. So areas within a drainage basin, they'll do things like afforestation schemes. They'll plant trees. And trees are one of the best ways to intercept rainfall and manage and slow down the flow of water getting into rivers, reducing runoff, which is something, again, you've covered in lots of detail in the UK landscapes topic. And again, a very standard kind of explain type question. Explain two different approaches to river flooding management in the UK. You can name any of these hard and soft engineering processes and explain how they work, or you could talk about river catchment management if you wanted to, but essentially you just got to name it, describe it, and explain how it's going to help manage flooding. So how would planting trees, afforestation, affect flooding? It increases interception to reduce surface runoff and slow the water getting to the river channel, therefore reducing the risk of it breaking its banks, bursting its banks. Okay, the final challenge is climate change challenges. So you need to be aware of the different sort of views about climate change in the UK and the impacts of climate change in the UK for the future, and also the ways in which we can respond both locally but also nationally. So again, what's the impact? What is the issue, climate change? What impacts could it have, and how could we resolve it? All right, so what you can see here, the map shows you that the UK is going to be warming. And it's going to be going up, and actually that's predicted to continue, and that's the positive news, because obviously a rise in temperature is seen by a lot of people as a good thing. However, it comes with consequences, and the weather patterns as well we'll talk about in a second. But the future UK's climate could see the UK's temperature going between 2 and 4 degrees higher than it is currently, and it causes warmer summers and warmer winters, but it does cause greater rainfall. So you sacrifice the nice weather for, if you're a bit warmer, but you're still getting soaked. Now, it might increase or decrease rain more dramatically. So that means we might get more extreme things like flooding, but also drought. And neither of those things is particularly good. So flooding and drought and the weather patterns associated with this increase in temperature are the problem rather than the temperature itself. Now the maps on the left here, they show you 2080's predicted change in the worst case scenario. So you can see in terms of precipitation, this is not temperature, this is about rainfall. So you might actually find that large parts of the south and the southwest particularly, and the southern tip of Ireland, could actually reduce their precipitation by 60 millimetres a year. That's a big amount, that's a huge amount. And not really something that's useful. Particularly, I mean, if you think East Anglia is in the orange, that could reduce its precipitation by up to 45 millimetres a year. You know, we grow crops. That is, a huge industry in East Anglia, and in the southeast in Kent and Lincolnshire. So that would be catastrophic for the irrigation of crops, and we're going to have to be a bit smarter about how we manage watering them. Heat waves is the other thing. So not just reducing precipitation for drought, but heat waves is a problem, and potentially intense rainfall events as well. Sea level rise is another factor as well, because of not just the fact that more land ice is melting going into the sea, but also thermal expansion of water. With temperature increase, water actually increases in volume. It's called thermal expansion. Just like if your hand swells a bit in hot weather and you can't get your rings off, for example, that is an example. So imagine the sea all swelling a little bit at once because of increased temperature change. And that's going to increase sea level rise. It's going to lead to more coastal erosion. Landforms are going to get eroded as well. So and obviously flooding of houses and infrastructure and things. So, things that we can do. How can we solve this issue? How can we respond to it? Well, from a local scale, use public transport, car share, recycle. You've heard all this before. Buy local, use renewable energy tech suppliers. Okay, so again, links into the energy topic quite a lot of this. Nationally, what can the government do? Raise awareness, inform people that this is going to be a problem, invest in renewable technologies, make it cheaper, make tariffs cheaper for people wanting to use green energy sources. Now, this is again a straightforward question which I'll leave on the screen for you to have a look at. Try and use examples in 3-mark questions because that's a good way to get exemplification. But this is, it should actually say, suggest one way people can respond to climate change at a local scale, because this doesn't specify one way. It would be useful if they did, so that you know you've got to extend it a bit more. But have a little look at that and a read of that and the advice given. Okay, now this is the section where we're going to look at exam question practice. I'm sorry if a bell goes once or twice during my explanation here. So what I've done, okay, is I've scanned in and filtered out from 2018 and 2019, paper 3, this particular section. So not only can you see the type of questions you're going to get, and you'll be pleasantly surprised, I think, to be honest, but you'll also see how the patterns between the 2 years goes, okay? So from 2018 and 2019, I've put the order of questions. Question 1 for 2018, question 1 for 2019. So you can see just how similar they are from, well, firstly, those 2 years worth of exam series. We haven't had lots of other past papers because exams have been disrupted, etc. So we've only got these to go on, but you can be fairly confident that it's going to follow the same pattern or trend going forward anyway. Okay, so here you go. Here's the first one. This is from 2018, and it's using this figure. Okay, section C, figure 5A. Study figure A in the resource booklet. It's not, it's there. Identify the decrease in annual CO2 emissions per capita from 1990 to 2030. Okay, pause the screen. I will let you do that, and then I'm going to reveal the answers really quickly afterwards and explain it. Okay, so hopefully you got the answer of 0.5 tonnes. That's because 1.4 minus 0.9 is what you're looking for. It's the decrease from 1990 to 2030. Okay, so that's as simple as that. It's literally a range question. Now 2019, the first question, is a graph rather than a table, but it says study figure 5A in the resource booklet, identify the estimated population for the Peak District National Park. Pause the screen, off you go, and then when you're ready, unpause. Okay, so the answer for this is B, 38,000. And again, it's a simple case of just knowing the scale, okay, and reading across very accurately. It goes to that particular, just one square before 40,000. So it can't be 40,000, it can't be 60,000. You can rule out that straight away because it's below that. 20,000 is clearly here, and it goes above that. So you don't even have to know the scale. You just literally have to use common sense to know that it's 38,000. All right. So that should be straightforward. Now, this is the first questions on both those two papers. What have they got in common? Well, they definitely have multiple choice, both of them. They are both only worth 1 mark, and they both use a resource to interpret or read. So there's a good chance, and it would be worthwhile you thinking this. Essentially, first question you're going to get for paper 3, topic 3 is going to be a 1 mark question with multiple choice and a resource that you need to use or read in some way. Okay? Now, second question. State 2 reasons why for the use of sustainable transport schemes in the UK for 2 marks. Have a go, pause the screen, when you're ready, unpause. Okay, so this says state, so it's not asking to explain anything, it's 2 reasons, it's literally just 2 words or 2 sentences. Why would you want to use sustainable transport? Reduce carbon emissions, reduce air pollution, improve air quality, reduce traffic congestion, but any 2 of these basically. But it does say do not accept environmentally friendly. That's just too vague, okay? So that's a nice easy one. Next one, okay, this is 2019. State 2 disadvantages of developing Greenfield sites for 2 marks. Pause the screen, off you go. Okay, basically the same question. Instead of stating 2 reasons why you'd want to use sustainable transport, it's stating 2 disadvantages of developing Greenfield sites. So there you go, just 2 basic answers. Makes it look bad, increases congestion, increases air pollution, reduces biodiversity, loss of habitats, blah, blah, blah. Again, 2 of these, fine. But it also has a do not award, so don't say it's expensive, because you've got to be a bit clearer, because actually it can be a bit cheaper to develop greenfield sites. Do not award urban sprawl, because that's irrelevant. It's not irrelevant, it's just a bit too vague. And accept any other appropriate response, but you've got plenty there. So what have these 2 got in common? Well, they both use state as a command word. They're both worth 2 marks for 2 points being made, 2 basic points, and they both specify do not accept. So make sure the points you're making do link to the question. Is it a disadvantage of greenfield sites? If the answer is no, then you won't get it right. Okay, next question. So study figure 5b in the resource booklet. Identify the projected population of the United Kingdom in 2025. Pause the screen, off you go. Okay, nice and easy. The answer is 69 million is C. Projected population in 2025. 2025 is there. This is a dot. It's just below 70. That's below 70. It's ridiculous. That's not close enough. That's too high. That's the only one that could work. Okay, very straightforward. In 2019, so 2019, study figure 5b in the resource booklet, another figure. Calculate the mean number of visitors per year. Answer to 1 decimal place. You must show your working in the space below. So mean number, work out how to do that, answer the question. Alright, so this question is 7.4 is the answer, okay? And you've got 1 mark for attempting the working, because you had to show your working. Okay, you must show your working. And then 1 mark for the correct answer written to 1 decimal place. So if you didn't do it, if you did it to 2 decimal places or you didn't do it enough, then you wouldn't have got that 2nd mark. Okay, 1 mark, max 1 mark if no working out but correct answer. So if you put 7.4, you can't get more than 1. Now this is where the papers differ slightly, because although they both use a resource, which they do, the first one is just to read the graph question. This one is a do something with it, like a calculate question. All right. Now they don't look like they're very similar, because but essentially, wait a second, because the calculate question for paper from 2018 comes in later on. Okay, so they still do have it in there. So next question for this one. Explain 1 reason why an increase in UK population could lead to pressure on resource consumption for 3 marks. We've actually done this in part of this lesson already. So pause the screen, off you go. Okay, so these are the ways that you could develop that answer, okay, for 3 marks. I'm not going to go through all of them for you because I've done it previously in the session. So looking at 2019 now. In 2019, explain 1 negative impact on development of UK national parks for 3 marks. Again, pause the screen, off you go. Okay, and again, nice and straightforward. It's exactly the same question, okay? They're both worth 3 marks. You have to explain one, so you need at least 2 connectives to access full marks. There is a pattern absolutely between these 2 papers. There's no reason to suggest why, when you do yours, it won't be the same pattern. Okay, now, do you remember I said to you, wait till question D for your calculate question from 2018? Here it is. Santander supports the hiring of bikes, a sustainable transport scheme in London. Study figure 5C. Calculate the increase in total membership from the Santander bike scheme between June and March. Okay, so this is the maths question that you didn't get from that line graph population question. Okay, here's the answer, 30,064, which is literally just take this number from this number. Again, a nice straightforward numeracy question. So there you go. This is the additional mark that accounts for the marks awarded for both question C, but shows that both years they looked at numeracy skills. So numeracy skills are definitely going to appear probably. Right. Next one. Explain 2 advantages of building on brownfield sites for 4 marks. Have a go. When you're ready, unpause. Okay, nice and straightforward. All you needed to do was give an advantage of a brownfield site. Okay, and then extend it. Advantage, extend it for 4 marks. It's been really lazy, the exam board, this year. Look, because it says utility infrastructure already in place plus development. What that means is plus the, like, if you've said a developed point. So it's got the infrastructure already in place, so it's cheaper than building it all from scratch. They haven't even suggested what you could actually put in there, which is a bit naughty of the exam board, a bit lazy. They also have a do not accept here, though. Don't accept environmentally friendly by itself. So 2019, explain 2 for 4 marks. What are we explaining? The approaches to conservation in UK national parks. Pause the screen, have a go, ready to unpause when you're ready, sorry. Okay, so this one they actually do give you the extended point rather than the last one, which is a bit lazy, and there you go. Now, similarities, patterns, trends, yes, absolutely. Both worth 4 marks. They both have to be 2 things explained, so 2 separate points, both extended with 1 connective. Again, completely pattern through this whole paper so far, both papers so far. Right, and believe it or not, before you get to that last question, the discuss 12 to 16 marker, that's all you have to do. It's not that much, is it? For a whole topic, and when you know the pattern and the trend that's going to occur. Now, the discuss question is another kettle of fish. This is going to take you the majority of your time for answering section 3 of paper 3. But because it's a very unique question, I have actually put a separate revision PowerPoint all to do with the discuss question. It's got a resource, it's got worked examples, it's got a model answer that we can talk through as well. So have a look at that PowerPoint when it comes to revising for that very final question, because it really is something which you will want to focus on. And if you can get the discuss question right, you've got a massive chunk of the marks for this entire paper in the bank. Okay, so it's worth 25% of the marks for the entire paper. Alright, which is massive. So what I've done is I've, like I say, created this specific tutorial to help you structure it in a formulaic way and approach it without being intimidated. If you've used my 8 markers made easy one, you will find it just as easy. Okay, so do not be intimidated by it. But that is the end of this session. So well done. Hopefully that's given you a good overview of the content from Paper 3, Topic 3, UK Challenges, as well as giving you a really clear idea about how the exam is going to present that information to you. And hopefully you've seen it as quite an easy thing. All right, well, that's the bell, so I must go. Thanks for listening, guys, and I'll see you next time for another session.